Please give a big hand for all of our speakers. Let's give one big hand to all of our speakers. So let's get started with our keynote. When I was looking for somebody to come up here and kick off WordCamp, 8 people rejected me. And then finally, I got a hold of Ben. I'm kidding. Ben Fox was my very first choice. I was sitting in this room February of this year, and I had an idea for a plugin. And I showed Ben Fox, and Ben Fox said, if you don't make that plugin, I will make that plugin. This guy has seriously encouraged me. He's made me a better developer. So I want to open up the floor to Ben Fox. Yes.
Music's up here. They're running into other rooms.
On May 18th last year, I became the luckiest man in the world. And she reminds me of that every day. I met my wife in the normal way, okcupid.com. But that's not the whole story. It's really not even close. So if you'll indulge me a little this morning, I'm going to tell it to you. If you bought a bagel in Toronto from a grocery store in the 70s or 80s, chances are you were buying a tasty bagel. David Levenstadt spent nearly 25 years building a business that dominated the Toronto and Southern Ontario bakery market. The son of a respected military commander, David's family owned and operated the flour mill in Drezgau, Poland, where he grew up. A large but close-knit city, the Levenstadt's mill helped power the local economy, and it was watching his mother run the mill and his father in the military where David learned the importance of relationships and community in business. So it really won't surprise you to know that David's business was predicated on 3 things: product quality, on-time delivery, and community. Now, like most business owners of the day, David didn't start with a dream of coming to Toronto and opening a bakery. But when David was 13, the Nazis invaded Poland. And of course, David's father, military commander, went off to defend his country. And it wasn't long before the Nazis' tanks defeated Polish cavalry. Metal beats horses, apparently. And the Nazis rolled into David's town. And they started rounding up the Jewish families and the homosexuals and anyone they really didn't like, which was a lot of people. Fearing for their own lives and their own safety, Levenstadt split up. So David separated from his mother and his sister. And David was hidden by a local baker who knew his father through the mill. This baker dressed David up like a girl and passed her off as his recently deceased daughter. I want you to consider that for a second. The Nazis are in your hometown. They're rounding up people. They're killing anyone that sympathizes with the people they hate. And this man, who's not family, who wasn't Jewish, dressed David up like his dead daughter to protect him. David eventually escaped his town. He fled to the east where he joined the resistance. He was eventually liberated by the Red Army. Of course, the Russians didn't liberate you at the time. You just joined the Red Army, where he eventually escaped that as well. And he ran quite literally across Europe. He made it to France. He got on an Allied supply ship and made his way to England. We're now in 1944, 1945. The war is ending. The war's ending, and David's got nothing left. So what does he do? He did like almost everybody at the time. He applied for immigration to the United States. Now, there were 2 requirements to get into the United States at the time. One was that you spoke at least some basic English, and two was that you had a trade. A baker wasn't a trade. So David had to learn to be a tool and die maker. Now, David was a delivery boy when he was 13. He was not handy. But he spoke English. So he met up with some local boys in London where that were Polish, that were basically in the same situation he was, that understood where he came from. And one particular boy by the name of Stanley helped David learn how to be a tool and die maker. He was already a master. David taught him English. All this because they came from the same place, they understood each other, and they stuck their necks out for each other. They didn't know each other. Eventually, they both were granted their visas, and they parted ways. Stanley left for Canada, where he had family, and David took for New York. We're going to talk about communities today. We're going to talk about relationships. We're going to talk about some things that have been happening, maybe in the WordPress community, maybe you've been noticing. And I'm going to tell a few stories. But where we need to start is right here, is where do communities come from? Communities are formed through a shared belief, goal, or hardship. Now think about it. We all belong to communities. Your neighborhood is the easiest one, the place you live. We all have different reasons for being there. Some of us might be there because we love the schools. Some of us might be there because the local park is awesome. Some of us might be there because it's where our parents live and it's free. I moved out weeks ago. But we all have different reasons for being there, but we're all there to support that community. And when something happens to that community, it affects us all. We disagree at times, right? But we're all there to support the central notion that this community is good. And that's any community. And a community can be as few as 2 people and can be as many as millions. And a community can be as close as we are in this room, or it can be as far away as Australia. But we're connected by a central, whatever that is, whether it's a goal, belief, or a hardship that we've experienced together. So I'm going to tell you a couple of things that I believe through my talk this morning. And one of those things is that I believe communities grow through relationships. Without relationships, without interconnection, all we have is an idea, right? All we have is that thing. It doesn't move, it just stays stagnant. The number of times I've heard the Advanced WP WordPress group brought up just this morning in this room is amazing. That's a relationship. We don't know each other, but we can all relate to the fact that, we know what that group is. If you don't belong to that group yet, Advanced WordPress Facebook group, Matt Cromwell, who's around here somewhere, he's the admin, talk to him. I have your chocolate, by the way. So communities are formed by a shared belief, goal, or hardship, and communities grow through relationships. He was born in July of 1958. He was diagnosed with a tumor in his right leg in March of 1977, and they took his leg almost immediately. On April 12, 1980, he dipped his false leg into the Atlantic Ocean in St. John's, Newfoundland, and he started what would become to be known as the Marathon of Hope. I'm talking about, of course, Terry Fox. In 1980, around September, after about 145 days of running and 5,700 kilometers, that's 3,300 miles in American, the tumor had reappeared in his body and started to grow. He had to stop running. It was around Thunder Bay, Ontario. But in those 143 days, so many people had gotten behind what Terry Fox was doing. This unknown, when he took off, he had his mother, his father, a couple of local friends, and that's it following him. At the end of 150 days, Isidore Sharp, the chairman of the Four Seasons Hotel, called Terry's mother and said, "No one will ever forget what Terry's done or been through, and until we cure cancer, every year in November." And we have done that every year since. Since 1980, the Terry Fox Run has raised over $600 million for cancer research. There are 14 schools named after him. There are 15 roads named after him. Now, that's in Canada, but still. 25 countries run the Terry Fox Run every year. If you're a student in Canada over the age of 8, you know who Terry Fox is, you know his story, and you know why he's important. But what the heck does that have to do with communities? Well, strong communities participate. We can all get behind cancer research, right? I mean, no one here is going to argue that cancer research is a bad thing. We know it's good. You know, and if somebody asks us about it and donate some money, we probably all know someone that's been touched by it, or someone knows someone that knows someone that's been touched by it. But why did this idea move forward? Think about the organizing committees that have to exist to plan a Terry Fox Run in every single country in 25 countries. These are volunteers for the money. Now, they're a big foundation now, and they've got some money, they probably have some stuff, but these are a lot of volunteers, much like Russell did here. Strong communities participate. They're active. And there's no better example of an active community than one that runs once a year for what they believe. And that's why I believe, by the way, that fun runs and all that stuff is permeated. You know, it's very cool to get, we now have walks and runs for everything. I feel like they're shutting down a highway in Toronto, every major city, every weekend in the summer now. Which for us is like 3 weeks. Being a self-deprecating Canadian is great. But strong communities participate. Success through community plus relationships. So, switching gears for a sec, I wouldn't be standing here if not for 3 relationships. And the stage is short. 3 key relationships. My business partner, Bart Dabek, a man by the name of Austin Gunter, and a man by the name of Chris Lemma. Wouldn't be a keynote without mentioning Chris Lemma. So I think my business partner is self-explanatory, but here's the thing. All 3 of those relationships were formed through the WordPress community. When I joined this community, by the way, I had no idea that I was joining a community. I thought I was just building a website, right? I didn't know I was being indoctrinated and trained and, and identified and all that. There's an automatician in the room somewhere. So, I met Bart because I sent out an email asking for help on a plugin. But I sent out that email knowing that somebody in the community, this community that I'd heard about, was going to respond to me. Because strong communities participate. So Bart got back to me. We started talking about the plugin, sat down and had a beer. For those of you that know what I do, it's called Sidekick, and the idea is that it's automated help and learning. And basically, Bart made the comment, I wish I could download my brain into somebody's computer. And I said, can you build that? He said, I don't know. 2 weeks later, we had a prototype. And that's a story for another time. But that first talk would not have happened if it wasn't for the fact that we were here. When we realized we had something, we said, okay, now what? And Bart said, I heard about this guy named Chris Lemma. I started reading Chris's blogs, and that's where I really started learning about what community was. And that's when the whole idea was taking shape. This is about 2.5 years ago. And I said, let's see if he'll talk to us. What do you have to lose? We had Chris on the phone 3 days later. We had Chris Lemma on the phone 3 days later. For like an hour. And then he sent out a tweet, and he was talking about what we were doing. At the time, it was called WP University. And then all hell broke loose. Because in our fervor to get our website up and not knowing who we were and what we were up to yet, we had duplicated some content from other people's sites. Bad. That content was never meant to be published. But it was. And the tweets started rolling in. And Syed Balkhi was pissed. And Chris Lemma, who had no reason to defend us. He knew him for an hour. Who could have just tossed us under the bus and moved on, right? Tweeted at Syed and said, calm down. They made a mistake. Give them a minute. They'll fix it. Key moment, right? Because when you think about it, that could have gone very, very, very badly, right? I'd be at a Drupal conference right now being... So that's Chris Lemma now, and then there's Austin Gunter. So we had some pretty, overnight success takes years, right? It takes years, it takes a long, long time. So our overnight success took a year and a half, and we signed WP Engine as our very first customer. They're still our customer, and that's great. And we're very happy about that. And that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Austin. See, what happened was we were looking for we just wanted to know if someone would pay for our products. We were just talking to people, and I tweeted at WP Engine, and I got a response. I didn't know at the time that the response was from this guy named Austin, but I got a response, which was pretty cool. And we started corresponding. He, again, reached out to me and said, hey, this is cool. What are you up to? Talk to me a little bit. Tell me about yourself. And to this day, Austin and I are still good friends, and that's been a 2.5-year relationship growing. And Austin's all over, is all over the world, but we talk at least once a month now. And so Austin introduced me to this guy Ryan Menugian at WP Engine, and Ryan introduced me to Jason Cohen, who I know who that is. And I ended up camping out at WP Engine office for a week 2 years ago. I literally came in and said, I'm working from here. I mean, I slept on Ryan's floor. I didn't know these people from anything, but they knew I was part of the community. And this is what community does. Shortly after that, they signed an agreement. They agreed to pay an amount, which helped us hire a new developer, which helped us get our development going. And with the help of Chris Lemma again and some other people, we signed GoDaddy and so on and so on. Now, what's interesting about these relationships is that they're all analog. We may communicate digitally through Facebook and Twitter and phone calls and text messages and I don't know what you kids are into these days, Tinder. Swipe right, left. Sorry? Periscope, yeah. But they're all analog. We got on the phone with Chris Lemma. Austin Gunter came to Toronto. I got on a plane and went to Texas. When you guys see these emails and these Facebook posts with these inside jokes or these people seem to know each other, like you kind of feel like you're on the periphery, join in, but know that if you really want to be part of this group, if this is a community you really want to be part of and you want to get into that core and really help make it grow, it's as simple as picking up the phone or sending an email to guys like Matt Cromwell, Dre Armetta, Chris Lemma, etc., and saying, how do I get involved? What can I do? They'll tell you. Trust me, they need your help. Because real relationships are analog. They're direct communication. Don't confuse digital, posting on Facebook with growing a relationship. And it's in working with these 3 people rather, that I've developed what I call my community rules. Now, I normally don't put a big list. I'm trying to keep my slides basic, but this was something that was very important to me. So rule number 1, real relationships are analog. So to have a community that participates, they need to participate in a real way, in a way that grows relationships. Rule number 2, provide value, not a transaction. We've all had this experience. We were just talking about it. You get the email from the person, the cold email, and they're immediately offering you a service. You have no idea who this person is. I don't know about you, but my first reaction is, go away. Like that. Right? But if you know the person, you're going to give them the time of day, you're going to talk to them, and that's how that works. So when you approach a relationship, whether it's in business or community or just trying to meet a new friend, it's not transactional. Do the right thing. We did the wrong thing by mistake, and we very quickly fixed it, and that was the right thing. And we've been apologizing ever since, and we will continue to apologize. But do the right thing. It sounds simple, but And we all know what that is. And if you don't know, ask. You can't say the wrong thing if you don't say anything. This is a lesson I've learned. If you're not sure, if you're not positive about something, just don't say it. Sit back and learn. Be silent for a minute. You can't offend somebody, for the most part, by not saying anything. Be responsible, considerate, patient, and polite. Or as my mother calls it, be a mensch. Right? Be a mensch. Just, again, no one ever got in trouble for being polite, for saying thank you in a nice tone, right? We all know, not #/s. Say what you do and then do what you say. That's another form of saying, if you make a promise, keep it. Be honest about what you're capable of. Aim to leave it better than you found it. When you join a group, when you join a community, that's a hard thing. I learned this in Boy Scouts, of all things. We would go camping, and our leaders were always, the one thing they insisted on was leave the campsite cleaner than you found it. Now, as like 9-year-old boys, we're like, I don't want to pick up someone else's garbage. But if everyone picks up one piece of someone else's garbage, there's literally going to be no more garbage. Someone breaking the rules is not an excuse for you to break the rules, which is a nice way of saying if someone is we've all seen those comments, right, lately, especially lately. Maybe you visit WP Tavern, we've seen people spouting like vitriol and just hateful and horrible and really mean stuff. Just because they did it doesn't mean you get to do it. Volunteer and step up and lead once in a while. These kind of go hand in hand. We have our leaders in a community, right? People who we think are our leaders, people who we follow, where they're our de facto leaders. They're only our leaders because we follow them. But they've got lives, they've got jobs, they've got other things to do. Step up and help every once in a while. And volunteer, run a WordCamp. Professor Selterman is a psychology professor at the University of Maryland. And as many psychology professors are, he's a little bit strange. Maybe some of you are laughing, maybe you know this already, but he's got this thing called the tragedy of the commons, which he set out to basically prove since 2008. Here's what he does. It's kind of mean. This appears on the final page of the submission for his class's final project. And it says, here you have an opportunity to earn some extra credit on your final paper grade. Select whether you want 2 points or 6 points added onto your final paper. Right? That's pretty awesome, right? But there's a small catch. If more than 10% of the class chooses 6 points, nobody gets anything. What do? It's called the tragedy of the commons. Here's what happened. Only one class since 2008 has received anything. And that one class fell right on the 10% mark, and when you read the paper, he claims it was a fluke. So this guy does 3 classes a year since 2008. That's X number of classes. Only one has received anything. And this received some notoriety because a student tweeted this out and was like, what kind of professor does this? This is cruel. But it's not. It's to illustrate a point that when people think no one else is watching, they will act for themselves. Right? We will. We do. When we don't think it matters, when we think no one will catch us, we generally act for ourselves. And that's okay. We're human. It's what we do. But communities only work if you work for the community. A community has finite resources. Our resources are generally not money or things, but they're time and knowledge and experience. And if we don't contribute, then that bank will get dried up. The people who we rely on to answer all those questions on Advanced WP will stop answering those questions. And the people that volunteer in the plugin repository, and the people that volunteer to run WordCamps, if we don't step up and help them, if we don't participate, if we don't contribute, if we don't give back more of ourselves than we take in, the community won't grow. It's a pretty, I'm sure if there's an engineer in the room can explain, it's a pretty simple rule of physics, right? You need to add energy to grow. Although if someone's got a perpetual motion machine, let me know. What the heck does this all have to do with how I met my wife? Right? What is it? I've kind of gone off on a little tangent here. Well, What happened was David arrived in New York and was quickly shunted to Toronto, which happened. He kind of got off the boat and they said, there's no more room, but we've got our friends in Canada and they're very nice and they'll take you. And so when he got to Toronto, he immediately, of course, went into the bakery business. He was not interested in tool and die making. He worked for his new mother-in-law's bakery, making deliveries. He, by the way, met his wife at the Jewish Community Center in Toronto because communities participate. And he took what he'd learned from his parents about relationships and about community building, and he applied it to his business. And after 25 years, he was the king of bagels. He was the hardest worker on his team. He was often at the bakery by 6 a.m. He often didn't get home until 1 a.m. He imported labor, full-time labor, from his town, the towns in Poland that had protected him. He brought in the children of the people that had helped out. Every Christmas, there were cases of Crown Royal, which is really awesome Canadian whiskey. Cases of Crown Royal stacked to the ceiling in his house. Because despite the fact that Christmas was not a holiday for him, he understood that giving a little gift, letting somebody know, whether they're a customer or an employee, at the time you gave alcohol, although you think you still give alcohol. But that little gesture helped just, foster some goodwill, which helps to power people's willingness to participate. But it was the Polish Jewish community that rallied around him because he rallied around them that helped build his business. How do I know all this? David was my grandfather. From David, I learned the value of relationships, the value of being honest, the value of community, the value of protecting and thanking those that have helped you and protected you. In year 2000, he passed away. I was 17. Lung cancer. Don't smoke. So David never got to see me graduate from high school. My grandfather wasn't there when I started my first business and got to start applying what I'd learned from him. And of course, he wasn't there on my wedding day. Didn't get a chance to meet Dara. But I'll tell you who was there. Stanley. And you're going, well, that's cool, you stayed in touch, right? No. I had never met Stanley. But it would have been weird for Dara's grandfather not to come to the wedding. And that's the thing about communities and relationships. If you remember why you're there in the first place, if you grow with genuine analog relationships and you really care, and if you work for your community, awesome can happen. My grandfather took of himself and gave to somebody, and because of that somebody came to Toronto, got married, and I got to meet my wife. So here's my challenge for you today. Create one meaningful relationship at WordCamp Las Vegas. You've got all day today, you've got the after party tonight, and you've got tomorrow. Just one. Somebody, like a real relationship. A friendship. See where it goes. Because awesome can happen. My name is Ben Fox. You can get me at Sidekick Helps. I don't blog over at a website called sidekick.pro, but check it out. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great day.